Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Well, I've decided after a couple of years of meaning to build a boat. Just a small, lightweight plywood boat to get me and my fishing tackle up to some spots on the river where I can't normally get to with the car. So what's so special about this boat? Well, absolutely nothing really, except that I've never built a boat before, so anything I do decide to build will be based on no experience whatsoever, just simply some research on the internet. Having said that, as you've probably seen from my other videos, I do DIY stuff with wood all the time, so it's not all new to me. It's just the not the aerodynamics, the hydrodynamics of the thing and making the thing waterproof. Now, I'm sure there's lots of you out there that go boating all the time that are going to pick me up on stuff I've got wrong, but basically I need a small boat which is lightweight and which fits inside my car, and this is the space it's got to fit into. So as you can see, it's not going to be a very long boat. The space in the back of the car is probably 1.6, 1.7 meters, and that's just not going to hold me, is it? So what we've got to do then is build a boat that you put together on the riverbank. This is kind of a nesting boat, I suppose you'd call it, and this is all the wood I've actually had cut already, but I'll come back to that in a second. Let me just show you on the computer. I've done a quick sort of sketch drawing. It's just to show you what it is I'm trying to achieve. So here's the sketch drawing then. It's not to scale, but basically you've got approximately 8 feet from the back to the front and about 3 feet wide. So that's about 2.4 meters by about 90 centimeters that way. Obviously the side pieces will add extra to that, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, this is what I'm calling the tub of the boat. This is where I'm going to sit, and this is where a lot of my tackle is going to be. And then on the front here, this is detachable. This front area will be enclosed for buoyancy, and this will be for more storage. And on the sides, we've got these outriggers that you can see that fit on there separately later. So if I show you how to disassemble it first of all, the front goes into the main tub, turns around sideways to fit, and then the outriggers fit into the tub itself, and then these other outriggers, just put that in properly, sit in there too, like that. And then in effect, what we've now got is 1.6 meters or thereabouts by about 90 centimeters of stuff. Then that's the stuff that's going to fit in the back of the car that I showed you before. So let's just undo all that for a second then. There we go. And that's it. So in terms of putting it together, they're going to be clamps that hold these on. These are just representations of clamps at the moment. And there may be one or two knobs with bolts which hold the thing together. But the idea is to have as few of those as possible, but still to make it as strong as possible. So that's it then, guys. Let's now go back to the bench. I can show you the paper drawing of my cutting plan, because these things come in 8 foot by 4 foot sheets, and you don't want to be cutting those yourself. So as I said then, I sat down with a piece of paper and I just drew myself a scale drawing of an 8 foot by 4 foot sheet of plywood. And then all I did was to work out what I had to cut out of that. Then you take it down to the local DIY supply store and you tell them to make the cuts. Now I think there's 3 cuts on here, one across there and a couple down this way. And you end up with fairly small pieces of wood which are manoeuvrable. You can get them in your car. You don't have to be trying to cut 8 foot by 4 foot sheets, and that's the beauty of this thing. It really does make it really simple. Yes, it costs you a little bit extra for the cutting, but frankly, to get these things cut from an 8 foot by 4 foot sheet, and in fact this big one behind me here, that's what I'm going to be sitting on, that would have just been quite difficult to do. So that's my recommendation: get the store to cut them for you. Now, I don't obviously have exact drawings of this thing. I'm not here to be a designer. As I've said, I have no knowledge of building boats whatsoever. So I'm hoping this will work out. But if you do decide to copy me, then please make sure that you've done your own research, because I can't guarantee that this is going to work. Only time will tell on that one. But it's going to be good fun to make it. And that's what I'm going to do next. Just before I actually go from there though, you may notice I've actually marked each piece of wood. That's a great idea, because if you don't do that, you'll have all these pieces that you cut up, and then if you leave it for a week or two, you'll think, what was that piece? Where did that one go? And I've done this in the past. I've picked up a piece of wood thinking it was what I thought it was, only to find that it actually wasn't what I thought it was. So be warned. Anyway, as I say, I'm now going to get on with building the boat. I've laid the base of the tub onto a picnic table to just give me some working height, saves my aching back. And what I've done is I've used my square to just run a pencil line all the way around this piece of wood at 6mm in. And of course that's there to take account of the 6mm plywood sides. I've also cut some uprights. These are 375mm, and they'll go obviously in the four corners like this. Now, to save a little bit of time, I've cut a couple of extra ones and I've clamped them down so that they are on those lines at this end and at that end. And now what I'm going to do is take this runner, which I've cut to size, and it just fits just in between these two end stops here. And what I'm going to do is glue and pin that together, and I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, I'm going to be using this stuff. This is Tight Bond 3 glue, and I've seen it used on the internet before. It's supposed to be waterproof, although it's not apparently designed for submersion underwater all the time. Anyway, it's waterproof, and that's what I'm going to use. Make sure it's a continuous bead, because I do want a waterproof seal, and I'm probably better off using more than less. Okay, with the glue on then, I'm going to take the batten and just lay it in to the hole I've made with the two end pieces, and I'm going to clamp it down. But before I clamp this down really hard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a damp cloth, and I'm just going to wipe up the excess glue so I can make sure I'm on the line. Clean up the rest of the glue later, but quick check to make sure we are on. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is take my brad nailer and just nail from underneath. Okay, so that's that side on. I'll clean up the rest of the glue and quick test fit on a piece of plywood just to be on the safe side. Then we'll do the same on the other side. That's the last one on, just the last little bit of getting glue off here. Just odd little bits coming out. That's just the last little bit there. And then I'm going to take this batten, and I don't need to measure anything. All I'm going to do is just make sure that that's level with that. Take my pencil, put a mark on. I'll take that mark across the top, take it across to the table saw, and I'm going to cut two of these. These will obviously go across here and at the far end, and then we can lay this thing down on the floor to dry off properly so it dries flat. Because at the moment there's a little bit of sag on this table, and I don't want that to translate into the base of the boat. We don't need a banana shaped boat, do we? So as soon as I got this on and nailed down, glued down, we'll get this on the floor. And that's it. We've got the sides on, we've got the front and rear on, and we're just now waiting, as I say, for that to dry. So I'll just pop this down on the floor, not very heavy, and just leave it there overnight. Just make sure that it stays flat, as I said. No banana bottom boats for us. So we'll come back tomorrow morning and carry on with the sides. The base panel's dried overnight, and I've put it back onto the picnic table, and it's nice and straight. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put these end panels on. This is the back one, apparently also known as a transom panel. And what I'm going to do is clamp it on and then just glue and tack it down with the brad nailer. I've already done that with the other side up there, and that's sitting up quite nicely now. And that'll form the basis, once I've got the back and the front on like this, to get these sides on in exactly the same way. So as you can see, I've got the sides on, they're just nailed on and glued, but it's still pretty solid. Now I've got to replicate this lower frame down here around the top, and to do that obviously I need to use these uprights. So I'll get all these glued in and glue it all together, and then we'll put it on one side overnight and come back to it tomorrow again once everything's dry. So there you go, that's the basic tub pretty much finished. As you can see, I've got the rest of the framing in overnight. It's had overnight to dry, and so far I'd have to say I'm quite pleased. It's actually pretty sturdy. Now again, for the boating folks amongst you, you'll notice the immediate error of my ways, because these sides are perpendicular, 90 degrees to the ground. And boats tend not to have that. They tend to have flared sides at, I believe, something like 12 to 15 degrees. And the reason for that, apparently, is because when the waves come and hit it, they don't go over the side, they hit it and go backwards that way. But I'm not going to be going on big waters, I'm not expecting to have any big waves, and I'm probably not expecting to have any boat wakes where I'm going. But, having said that, do you remember we spoke about these outriggers, the pontoons that are going on the side for stability and safety? Well, the outsides of those are going to have 12-degree sides, or thereabouts. So I'm hoping that that will actually take account of what we were talking about here. Anyway, only time will tell on that one. In the meantime, here's a quick look at how it fits in the car. And it does actually fit in quite nicely. Front to rear, plenty of space, and there's a little bit more space down the sides if I want to put extra bits and pieces along there. So the next thing we've got to do then is to build the front section, or the bow section, which is going to clip on to this main tub here. And we're going to do that now. Now the bow section is going to be somewhat more difficult to make. The construction itself is going to be exactly the same, but the problem lies in the fact that the front has to curve up from the water level up to the front of the boat so that it glides through the water more easily. And that's the rub, making a curve. So what I've done, this is the side panel, and you may not be able to see it too well, but just along here is the curve I've drawn. It starts from about 30 centimetres from the edge, and it goes up to about 200 millimetres at the front. And to do it, I just took my ruler, bent it onto the wood. I can't really show you too well here, but you get the idea, and then just use the pencil to create the line. So what I'll do now is I'll cut that on the jigsaw to the line, and then we'll think about how we're going to do the bending of the base and holding that in place. I clamped both sides together and I cut along the line, but it's only a rough cut. I can never get a perfect cut when I'm using the bandsaw on a curve. So I've gone outside the line, and I'm going to use the belt sander behind me just to smooth everything off up to the line. Well, that didn't work out too badly, did it? I've got the curve in, as I say, not totally perfect, but not far off at all. Question now is, if I've got to bend a sheet of plywood to fit that, and this is only 6 millimeters thick, how do I connect the base to the sides? And that's where we use a thing called kerf bending. And here's an example of it. This was a piece of the wooden rails that I used on the main tub itself, and I've just cut a series of slots on the table saw through it. Now there is actually a complicated formula for doing this, but you don't really need to worry about it. All you need to do is to make sure that, depending on the wood that you're using, plywood and ordinary wood like this has different amounts, but depending on the wood, if you give yourself sort of 3 or 4 millimeters from the top and then cut this series of slots, I've done these at I think it's 15 millimeter centers, you'll actually find, if you put this on, I'll try and lift this up for you and do it so you can see, but if I now bend that up like that. You get the idea. Kind of awkward position, but hey, it works. If you get it wrong, like I did earlier on, this is a piece that I did, it actually snapped just there. So I'd actually got those at something like 25mm centers. And there are calculators online that can tell you exactly what it is you need to do. But frankly, if that does the job, that does the job. It's going to get glued to the sides, as you see, and then that will form the basis for me gluing the base of the frontage on. And again, that's the plan. Never done this before myself. We'll give it a go, see what happens. So the plan is to run a bead of glue all the way along this edge and then clamp this onto it just using these clamps. Then I'm going to take the brad nailer, I'm going to nail them in, and hopefully that'll do the job. Well, that wasn't as hard as I expected actually. The first one was a bit fiddly, admittedly, but by the time I got to the second one, it was a lot easier. I was getting the hang of it. So, as it turns out, they are a parallel structure. I will just give them a bit of a sand down just to make sure I've got any sort of slight edges off them at some point. But really, I need to leave these to dry now. While I'm doing that, I'll get on with doing the back panel, and then we can put it all together and get the base panel on, and hopefully we'll be looking like we're getting towards a boat. And that's where I made my mistake. Well, it's two mistakes actually. I was cutting the bit for the bulkhead here, and I remembered I got to allow 6mm to put the front plate in. Then I realised that I hadn't allowed 6mm for it down here, and it's the same at the back. So I'm now going to have to somehow on the table saw very, very gently just cut out those two 6mm on either end. However, it's not the end of the world. I can do it. It's just going to be a bit of a pain. Okay, so I've rectified the issue with the lack of gap along here, and while I was at it, I've taken the opportunity just to add the rails at the top and the back and the front. So everything's ready to go now, and all we have to do is to take the back plate and the front plate and just attach them with glue and some nails so that we're ready to go. The difficult part is going to be getting that base on, I think, but we'll show you that in a minute. I've got some glue on the faces that need it, and I've pushed the side panel up to the back plate of the bench here, so I've got a nice square situation going on, because then all I have to do is to put the back plate on, try and hold it somehow, and then just get a few brads in it. First couple of the worst. So now I've got this panel on, it's just a question of waiting for it to dry. I'll give it a short while I go and get a quick cup of coffee. Then I'll fit the other side panel, I'll fit the front in exactly the same way, just a bit of nailing and gluing. And then we'll do the difficult part, which is going to be, of course, the base. I just hope that part works, because if it doesn't, I don't have a plan B. I've cut a chamfer on this panel to accommodate the curve here. And obviously, as you can see, I've put the glue on. If I push that back up against there again, and butt this up, that then follows the curve all the way around. And the base panel, when I get to it, will actually fit on there. So, I've taken the time to put these upper and lower rails on at the back to support that, and I've also cut out this piece of 1/2" ply with a chamfer on it, and that is going to go in at the front plate and support this, because this is only 6mm plywood, 1/4" plywood, so this will go in and it'll just give it a bit of extra support there for gluing and nailing. So what I've done now is I've put a back plate on, here. This comes slightly above the height of the project, but that means I can now butt up the base to that and start doing the gluing and nailing part. So I suppose I better get the glue on and see if this works, haven't I? As you guessed, that back plate that I've just taped on for the moment is there to hold everything square. And if I get this right, excuse the rear view. Okay, that should be the worst of it. Oh. Okay, going to need to screw these down. So plan B, well, I've taken the top off, and what's happened is the nails didn't pull out. They're still in there, they've pulled through there. So it's going to have to be screws. Back in a sec, once I've sorted the problem out. Should have thought of this before, really. However, certainly not perfect done. Well, that was a bit more stressful than I'd hoped it would be. Obviously, I definitely made a big mistake by trying to use the brad nails, but the screws do seem to have rectified it, and we now seem to have a nice curve on the side, and everything's holding down very well. You may notice that there's a lip here. I can try and hold this a bit more steadily for you, where I've had an overlap when I was actually holding the thing down, because I didn't know exactly where the piece of wood was going to end. So I just made it a little bit longer. And what I'm going to do now is just take this pull saw and I'm going to cut along it, just literally like this. And hopefully it'll give me a fairly decent cut, which I can then just sand down. Okay, well, having cut that down now and sanded the front, the lip has gone and it's turned out quite nicely. Very pleased with that. And what I've done is I've just clamped the front section to the tub section here for you, so you can get an idea of how this is going to look. I've put this plank on so I can sit on it, but if you look at the bow section here, there will be a plate which comes across the front. That's going to be a buoyancy area, and it probably will be sealed up. I'll have a storage open area in here. I'll be sitting here, got more storage behind me, and of course I've got an outboard motor to go on the back. So the last things we've got to do then is to fit a transom plate to the back of the main tub area, and also then fit some reinforcement points at the front where I'm going to be bolting the front to the back. And we'll do that now. The transom's actually very simple. It's not going to take a big outboard, it's only going to be about 1.5 horsepower. One of those little Chinese jobs. So all I've done is I've created a batten across here, an upright on here at about 120mm centres to accommodate the bracket, and this is the second bracket, which is just going in exactly as previous. I'm just going to tack it in and glue it. So that forms the framework. Now what we've got to do is get this plate on here. Okay, so this is the fiddly bit. I've got the glue on, and I know I'm going to get it with my fingers, so I'll just have to live with that. If I put this in and then mate it up, I made it a nice tight fit, so I don't need an extra pair of hands. That should fit quite nicely. And now it's just a question of getting a few brad nails in. Okay, so final bit of cleanup, and that's the transom all done and dusted. As I say, I'm not going to use any heavy motors on this. It wouldn't take a really big motor. Well, you never know, it might. But anyway, I'm only going to use 1.5 horse, so this should be plenty for that. Now, I could have made it easy for myself, and I could have just made a plate to go down here, but I did want that a bit of extra strength, which was gathered by making a complete plate all the way across the back. So with the transom complete, we now just have to do the reinforcing points for the holes that are going between the front and the rear sections, and we're pretty much done for the day. I've cut some 6mm plywood into 12cm squares, and they're going to form brackets down in the two corners here and here. Now, to save time and show you what I'm doing, I've cut those down. There's a notch out of here to accommodate this rail, and a 45-degree angle on there because I don't need a complete square. That fits in neatly like that, and then it'll be pinned and glued in there, and the bolt will go down through and out of the back here. Of course, that'll then fit onto the front, and there'll be the same arrangement at the front. But as it stands, that hollow in there is not going to help. So I've just cut a piece of this pine wood to fit in there to form a nice solid piece. And all we have to do, as I said, is just pin and glue that, and do the same on the other side, and then repeat that on the bow section. That's the glue on the triangular section. I'll just put that in there, pin it to the back just to make sure it doesn't come away. We'll get some glue on here next. And that's the first one done. So as I said, one more in this corner, two in the front end, but there's no point in showing you those because I've already shown you what I've done here. So that's it for this episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, click the button. If you want to subscribe, you can. And until the next time, bye for now.